The John A. Burns School of Medicine in Kaka'ako could not have been built without the vision and leadership of Dr. Edwin Cadman, who oversaw its planning and construction. To honor Dr. Cadman's contribution to the school, JAPSOM and the University of Hawaii at Manoa hosted a reception on October 29, 2009. Scores of friends, colleagues, and students came to the campus to salute the former dean. Dr. Cadman's vision, dedication, and commitment are embodied in the state-of-the-art facilities here.
And your statement of the future for UH Medical School?
Well, I think I've been here 2.5 years, and I'm delighted to be part of the team that will create this new environment that will hopefully drive the biotech industry for Hawaii. And I'm just delighted to be the dean of the John A. Burns School of Medicine.
That's great. And it really is something that you've done. You've done extraordinary things. Did you ever think when you came to Hawaii that it would go this way?
I thought it would be tougher.
That's great.
Chancellor Virginia Henshaw.
Aloha. What a wonderful evening of celebration and also of gratitude.
Dr. Henshaw co-hosted the event with Cadman's successor as dean, Dr. Jairus Hedges. Dr. Cadman's legacy was reflected in the aloha shown to him that evening. The school's medical students performed a hula, expressing their gratitude to Dr. Cadman. Among the many guests who honored Dr. Cadman that evening were Dr. Hank Wu, Dr. Linda Chang, and Judge James Burns, son of the school's namesake.
2000, the governor, Ben Cayetano, wanted me to meet him in Kaka'ako, and on the 10th floor of the Gold Bond building, and it's a corner conference room, and he pointed out this 10-acre site. And I looked around, and this is where the biotech industry for the state will be nurtured, because the medical school will be the creation of the science for the biotechnology industry. We'll have two buildings. The Education Administration building will be 112,000 square feet, and then the research building will be 212,000 square feet. The design is an open space research building, so that it can be modified on a moment's notice to create specific environments for specific research. There will be no permanent walls within the research environment.
Dr. Hank Wu of Cellular Bioengineering said Dr. Cadman's dream had come true, to build a place where the brightest minds from Hawaii and around the world could come to change the world.
That was the vision it had, but he was more just a visionary. He was also a leader.
Therefore, his vision and legacy will continue through many generations, many future generations.
Hi, Dr. Cadman. It was an honor working with you and knowing you.
And it was great having you as my tutor for MD4. We'll miss you.
We'll miss you.
Hi, Dr. Cadman. Thank you so much for your vision and your help. Our two kids have come through your program, and with your vision and your help. Mahalo.
Thank you so much for everything. We appreciate it. Aloha, Dr. Cadman. Thank you.
You actually made an awful lot of opportunity for me, and I'm real clumsy at saying thank you, but thank you, and we both love you, and we will very much miss you.
Thanks, Ed.
Not particularly eloquent, but I think you understand the feeling.
I can remember very well when you came and visited me when you were interviewing, and we didn't think you'd make the right decision at that point, but you came here and you made the big difference. The medical school wouldn't be here without you.
Ed, the medical school would not have been built without you. And I agree with you. For all of your leadership and inspiration. And good luck.
Ed, you had the courage and vision to make all this possible. And in the words of Tina Turner, you're simply the best. We love you. Mahalo.
Glad I'm here too.
So in our ongoing inquiry, tonight let's explore the subject of science in Kaka'ako, dream or reality, with our guest Ed Cadman. And for reference, you are listening to ThinkTech Hawaii on Hawaii Public Radio, KIPO FM 89.3, with Dean Cadman of the UH Medical School. Let's think about tech together. Let's loosen up. Please call us. What do you think about the new medical school? Have you any questions about what's going on? Call us and ask Dean Ed Cadman for the answers. I'd like to set the stage for tonight's discussion with our man on the street. Jesse Domingo asked 3 questions to men and women on the street. The 3 questions are, do you think we need a new medical school? Do you think it should go into Kaka'ako? And do you think we might have spent the money on the public school system instead? So, here are the answers we got in our men on the street questions.
Do you think we need a new UH medical school in Hawaii?
I haven't heard of anything that's wrong with the one we have.
I think it depends on the facilities now.
My understanding is that the medical school may be in danger of losing its accreditation if a new facility isn't constructed. And if that's the case, then certainly something should be done.
No, I think we should refurbish and expand what we have right now.
Yes, I do.
No, I think we should close the medical school. I think it's cheaper to run a medical school on the mainland.
Do you think Kaka'ako is the best place for a new UH medical school?
No, I don't think so. There's no parking over there as it is.
It seems to be a good location. I mean, they've really cleaned it up. But as far as the students traveling from the UH campus to Kaka'ako, I'm not sure if that's really reasonable. Why wouldn't it be on the UH campus?
We've been talking for years in this state about moving facilities and infrastructure out to the Kapolei area. I would think they'd want to look at moving it out there.
It's as good as any other site, and the fact that it's close to Manoa campus is not a bad site.
Do you think it would have been better to spend the $150 million on the public school system?
It's for education. It's better than other things they could be spending our money on.
I would think so. Not only UH, but all the public school systems need a lot more funding.
If it's an either-or proposition, that probably would be better spent on the public schools, but it seems that both should be a priority.
This money could be spent better in repairing dilapidated classrooms and putting more computers on kids' desks and books and libraries.
Can do both, that would be great. They're 2 different end games.
Well, how about that for a sampling, Dean Cadman? Take a moment and give us your thoughts and responses, and I'll remind you of the questions. The first one was, do you think we need a new school? You heard the answers. Do you think it should go into Kaka'ako? And do you think we should have spent the money or should be spending the money on the public school system instead? Any thoughts about what those people were saying?
Well, I think this state needs a medical school. There are 125 medical schools in the country. And John Burns decided that if they wanted a great university in 1965, that they needed professional schools So he decided to convince the legislative body at that time to create a medical school and a law school. At that time, there were 82 medical schools in the country, graduating 7,500 doctors. And if you weren't in the top of your class, as a son and daughter of Hawaii, you would not get into medical school. State medical schools were as competitive as schools, private schools like Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. So there were limited opportunities for students from Hawaii to become physicians. So there were two reasons. Now, the medical schools in this country elevate the clinical care of the community in which they reside. We have 1,200 volunteer physicians. There are only 2,500 licensed physicians in this state. And those 1,200 physicians need to be on top of their field because they train students and residents. And that translates into better care for their patients. Moreover, the training sites are in hospitals and clinics. We have affiliations with all the hospitals in Honolulu, and students and residents elevate the care of those patients in those hospitals just by the training they receive. Nurses train students and residents, technicians train students and residents, and that translates into better care for every patient in these hospitals.
What about the location? We asked the question of whether Kaka'ako is a good place. Is it a good place?
Well, yes, it is. Kapolei, and I agree that something needs to be done for those students out in west Oahu, but the medical school needs to have access to the hospitals, and the hospitals, by and large, are in Honolulu. This site is a mile from Queens, 2 miles from Kapiolani, 2.5 miles from Kuakini and St. Francis and Kaiser. These are our main affiliates. The location in Kapolei would be unacceptably geographically too far.
What about these other possibilities that came up? As I recall, there was some suggestion of using the area behind the border water supply near Queens.
Well, that is too small of a site. The Kaka'ako site is ideal because what we want to do is create a biotech environment. We want the medical school to help diversify the state's economy through biotech. And you look around the country, where is biotech and where does it come from? It comes from discoveries made at research medical centers. And these small companies are clustered around where the research is being done. That's why they're in San Diego. That's why they're in San Francisco Bay Area. That's why they're in Seattle. That's why they're in Boston, Atlanta, Dallas. They're not in Idaho. They're not in Montana. And they wouldn't be here in Hawaii without a research component to this medical school.
Is there a research component to this medical school right now today?
Well, there is, but it's limited. There are some outstanding faculty doing research, basic research. But we want to grow the research environment. For example, 3 years ago, our research faculty were generating $5 million in research grants and contracts. Today, our faculty are generating $40 million on an annual basis with research grants and contracts. And how did that happen? Because we broadened the mission to include research. We created a research office to help faculty write grants, and we recruited some faculty that brought grants with them.
If you have a question or want to make a comment or talk to Dean Cadman, please call us at 941-3689 or toll free from the neighbor islands at 1-877-941-3689. And if you want, you can ask him how to get in. I recall there are 1,162 people looking for 62 seats in the medical school. And so maybe if they talk to you nice, they'll get an advantage here tonight.
Well, I'm not on the admissions committee.
Carefully done, I think.
Too bad.
But you're right, it's very competitive. Our school has ratios akin to Stanford, Harvard, and Yale. And it's correct, there were 1,162 applications for 62 positions.
That's remarkable. So, I'd like to get kind of a handle on the order of magnitude. Can you describe, in an order of magnitude, where we are today with the UH Medical School? Because I think most people don't know. They don't know exactly where it is, or how big it is, or the student body, the general parameters of it, and where you want to take it in the various stages you have planned out in the development in Kaka'ako.
And I
Lori.
think that will also help people understand the need for a new medical facility versus why can't we continue to use the existing facilities.
Those are all excellent questions. The current medical school is at the end of East-West Road on the back of the UH campus near the East-West Center and behind or in front of Mid-Pacific High School. It is a building 30 years old, going on 32, I think, actually. To renovate these research buildings would be more costly than to create research buildings new.
Has the structure of research buildings changed in 30 years?
Oh, yeah.
When you do research now, you would define the spaces differently than when you built them, say, 30 years ago.
Right. It's sort of like the small businesses, mom-and-pop grocery stores, hardware stores. The transition for research is similar to the Home Depots, the Walmarts, the shopping centers. So that it used to be faculty had an office in their lab, and the lab was like 300 square feet, and you locked the door and you went in and tinkered. Today, it's a team effort. They're open labs. Their equipment is so expensive that you can't afford to give each individual faculty member their own equipment. So it's shared equipment and it's shared space.
You know, it raises an interesting question. Certainly in 30 years, it's been a huge change. And the rate of change, I'm sure you'll agree, changes. So that we have things moving faster now. The delta factor between 30 years ago and now would take only, say, 10 years into the future. Right. So how do you know what you build in Kaka'ako is going to last more than 10 years, given the rate of change?
Well, that's also an excellent question. The design is an open space, generic research building, so that it can be modified on a moment's notice to create specific environments for specific research. There will be no permanent walls within the research environment except to contain what some research laboratory equipment, the noisy stuff that creates fumes.
Open modular idea, sort of like the federal building where you can move partitions
yes.
if you need to. We have a bunch of questions stacking up, Dean Cadman, and I wonder if I could get to some of them. Gordon,
yes.
Are you on the line?
I'm on the line.
This is our own Gordon Bruce, calling from New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah, at the Realm Tech Conference.
Always with the tech.
I'm sorry I'm missing this guest.
Well, what's your question, Gordon?
My question is a two-part question, and the question is, I have a concern about the state spending between $150 and $300 million. I don't deny the fact that we need a new school of medicine. That's not the problem. The problem spending $150 million to $300 million for a new school of medicine when we can't even get the public schools renovated and upgraded. And then in addition to that, my concern is, why would you build a building not adjacent to a medical facility? Why would you build it miles away from the medical facility and build it in the parking lot behind the Board of Water Supply right next door to the Queen's Hospital?
Gordon, we're going to give Dean Cadman a chance to answer at least part of that, okay?
Okay, super.
You have an excellent point. The original program is $150 million. The university sold the bonds. They were oversubscribed. They sold out in June 12th in 2 hours.
June 12th of this year?
Yeah, June 12th of this year in 2 hours. UBS Payne Weber out of New York. The money is in the First Hawaiian Bank, $150 million. It isn't an either-or situation. I agree with you that we need to do something about our public school system. We need to repair the schools. We need to pay people more money. We need to hire more teachers. But this is a separate issue because it's not coming out of the same pot of money. It's not general obligation bonds. Moreover, the research that's being done, the National Institutes of Health has a $27 billion budget, and it goes all to biomedical research. And
that's where most of the grant money comes from, the National Institutes of Health.
Right. And they pay the true cost of doing business, called the indirect cost rate. The average medical school indirect cost rate is 50%. Now, what is that indirect cost rate? How's it calculated? It's calculated by utilities, maintenance, depreciation, and or debt service. So we can...
This is a long way from your training in oncology, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
You certainly sound like an accountant or a businessman rather than an oncologist
right,
today.
Right. So this is like building a hotel and the federal government picking up the depreciation, the debt service, the utilities, the flowers in the lobby, the maid service, the valet service, and the profit is whatever the room rate is. Medical schools research is big business. Successful medical schools can be financially independent. And my economic model is that I'm not going to go back to the state for any operating dollars. We will make money and drive the biotech industry for this state. Now, the ideal situation, yes, it should be closer to a hospital, but the space is not available. And Kamehameha Schools and Ward Enterprises own sufficient space to create leasable research space. There is no leasable research space here in Hawaii.
So one of the big benefits in the Kaka'ako area is that you can have other biotech-type facilities and spaces, commercial spaces nearby.
Yeah, that's right.
Kamehameha Schools has actually indicated that it will make that space, it'll allow development right around the site for the Kaka'ako Medical School so as to make that happen.
Right. Yeah, there's 10 acres right across the street from the medical school. Medical school is a 10-acre site behind the Gold Bond building in front of the Kaka'ako Waterfront Park. It's where the produce transfer stations are. And they're scheduled to move by August 31st, and the groundbreaking will be in October sometime.
Can Gordon come?
Sure.
Okay, Gordon, you're invited to the groundbreaking. I want to go to another call, though, because we're stacking up. Gordon, is that okay? Okay, Deborah. Are you there, Deborah?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good.
Hi.
You want to pose your question to Dr. Cadman?
Yeah, Dr. Cadman, I'm a little confused how it seems like the effort at Kaka'ako would be biomedical research, and I'm in the field of gerontology and acutely aware of the shortage of gerontologists in the community. So it's kind of maybe unrelated, but I'm sort of wondering how it's going to affect the shortcomings in our existing medical school, just how the whole thing ties together, if it does at all.
Well, that's an excellent question, too. We have one of the nation's leading gerontology programs directed by Dr. Pat Blanchett, and in fact, the review committee is here for its annual review of that program, and it is absolutely outstanding. It generates its own funding, $3 million annually. We will not have any clinical activities in Kaka'ako. We will have the Education Administration building there. We'll have two buildings. The Education Administration building will be 112,000 square feet, and then the research building will be 212,000 square feet.
And Lori and I were calculating that's the size of some of the office buildings in Honolulu, downtown. So that's a lot of square footage.
But the gerontology geriatrics program will be elevated to a department, and it's at Kuakini Hospital. We have relationships, wonderful relationships with all of our hospitals, and we have clinical programs at most of these. The department, pediatrics and OBGYN are at Kapiolani. Medicine and surgery are at Queens. And geriatrics is at Kuakini.
Well, let me add this, per our discussion earlier, Dean Cadman. The number of graduates that you are graduating now is in the, what did you say, 60 or so?
Yeah, 62.
And, oh, sure, that same number, 62. There's 62 seats. Everyone knows. I want one. And so you're not going to change that number. The expansion of the medical school, the redevelopment of the medical school in Kaka'ako is not going to affect that number. Am I right?
Correct.
So that in terms of, Deborah's question as to what effect this might have on the local medical community is not necessarily going to pump a lot of new doctors in through the medical school. Let me go to another call, though, if I may. Roger is here from Kaneohe, and he has a question.
Yes, hi. Dean Cadman, I just had a question. You mentioned earlier the John Burns Medical School as being 30 years old, which in terms of buildings isn't really that old. I think I understand how it's old with regard to the kind of research that you have in mind these days, but what are the plans for the old medical building?
Well, that's an excellent question, too. Structurally, it's very, very sound, but the limitations are that we cannot do modern research in that building. So it will be refurbished to meet the then needs of the university. It's undetermined what the needs might be, but the university will be growing, and we will retain some research space at the building that will accommodate the research. But the administration and education space will be refurbished to suit the needs of the university.
So you're not giving up the old building?
Well, we are, but some research space will be retained by the medical school.
Gordon Bruce called back and left another question for you, Dean Cadman. He's relentless. He wondered if you could say what the $150 million was going to go for. As I understand it, legislature authorized a bond issue by the university, by the medical school, and it would be guaranteed by the state, and the income would be guaranteed, the interest payments on the bonds would be guaranteed by the tobacco fund. And the bonds are 30-year bonds. They're paying something over 5%, so they're a real good bargain in this particular bond market. But there are none around for new issuance, and you have to get them on the secondary market right now, even if you really want them bad.
Right. There was a contentious issue about how the interest and principal payments were being funded. The state receives $42 million a year out of the tobacco settlement, and that goes for 25 years, the first part of the tobacco settlement. The interest and principal payments are estimated to be about $10 to $11 million out of that $42 million. So we're not using all of the tobacco money.
I have to add that I didn't read the question exactly right. Gordon wanted to know whether the $150 million also covers books. And he always asks about that because he keeps thinking about the library in Kapolei. So, does it cover books?
It does cover books. We plan on moving the Hawaii Medical Library to the new medical school.
I have another question. Will the new medical school provide opportunities for children in school? In other words, will there be a track for Hawaii students in the new medical school? And putting it this way, will it be different than the existing track for Hawaii students and applicants?
Well,
jobs, internships, research,
right.
all that possibility.
That's also an excellent question. We want to do anything that can create jobs and bring money into this state. Research is really a big business, as I mentioned before. Let me give you an example. $1 million lab has about 10 people, not including the professor that runs the lab. 5 of these are research technicians, and the other 5 are research associates. These research technicians are people who are the valets and the waiters in the tourist industry. We can train these students in high schools and community colleges. In fact, we are in discussions with the Department of Education about a training program currently, so that these people will get salaries between $30,000 and $35,000. The research associates are college graduates, and if you graduate from a university in Hawaii in biology, biochemistry, zoology, physiology, and you want to pursue your career that you've just spent 4 years doing, you have to go to the mainland. We can train those people to become research associates.
So it's a career job.
Yeah, and those salaries begin at $35,000 and go all the way up to $70,000, depending upon how long and your expertise in research.
They're going to be state employees?
Yeah, they would be state employees.
State retirement, all that?
Yeah, state retirement because it's a state medical school. We plan on having 50 new laboratories, and so that translates into 500 research technicians or research associates. Then you talk about the private industry, the biotech industry, which is going to be located right across the street. You're talking about another 1,000 jobs. And our economic model projects $80 to $100 million just at the new medical school. And if you complement that with The private industry, you're talking about another $100 million on an annual basis. So we want to work with the high schools and community colleges to train the workforce for the biotech industry. There are two things lacking in this state if you want biotech: the space and the workforce.
We have another question. It's not exactly the same, but we're back to construction here for a minute. And this is the question that came in. In light of the construction problems that are currently being experienced in UH, and specifically on the UH campus, and I'm referring not to one, but two articles in today's papers. One in the case of there are two unoccupied floors in the geophysics building that haven't been occupied in a while and can't be occupied, and huge amounts of money have been wasted there, or at least lost. And then in today's paper, there's something about the roof. A contractor had a problem on the roof of the UH library, and that's going to cost, it's an $800,000 job, and that's going to cause some delay and contracting problems. So I know we go into a project like this with $150 million, but it's not all as simple as it seems sometimes. And how do you know those kinds of things won't happen in this project?
The architects on the project are Architects Hawaii, and they've been working on this for 2 years. This is a design-build process. There was a selection process that was concluded in March, and the winning contractor was Hawaiian Dredging. They paired up with Kojima. Now, Kojima is a $16 billion revenue on an annual basis construction company. They have built research buildings. They built some at Amgen, a research facility, a pharmaceutical company in Thousand Oaks, California. They built some laboratories at the National Institutes of Health. So they are in the business of building research buildings. We have a consultant out of San Diego that does nothing but helps architects design research buildings. It's called Research Facility Design. So we're doing everything we can possibly do to avoid spending extra money because of failed construction.
Well, sure. There's always the possibility of a cost overrun.
Yeah.
When do we not have a cost overrun in these kinds of projects?
But we will absolutely hire the building trades locally to do all of our work. We're not going to import anybody to do this work.
Did you go out to bid and everything on this?
We did have a competitive process. 7 construction companies bid on the project. There was no monetary bids, so it was the design assist process, so that we worked on the history of these companies, again, to satisfy the need that we wouldn't have a deficient design process so that we could not complete the project.
So you're looking at track records and experience
Absolutely.
factors. But do I hear you saying that you didn't necessarily go on the low bid?
We're now costing out the project. So if we cost out the project, then we'll go out for bid, assuming that Kojima and Hawaiian Dredging say they can't meet the bid.
What is the part of the $150 million that's going to go for the construction of the physical structure?
About 120.
You know, last week we had a wonderful guest on the show, Dr. Joshua Jacobs, and he spoke in the kindest terms of you, Dean Cadman.
Oh, thank
He's
you.
on your faculty, Dean Cadman.
Yeah, I know him. I know him.
And he spoke of informatics. That was the subject of our show. And we were wondering with him what role information technology and informatics would take in the construction of this new facility. Is it going to be IT smart? Is it going to have cutting-edge technology in the information technology aspect?
Yes, it will. It will be IT smart. In fact, we're setting aside 12,000 square feet in the education building to create a simulation education center. I believe that, physicians are going to have to get credentialed like airline pilots go on an annual basis to fly a simulation airplane. Physicians are going to have to go into these simulation virtual environments to do surgery, to do caths, to put catheters in the arteries and hearts, to scope colons and whatever. to be certified.
You're going to have that kind of equipment in this facility,
Yeah.
and those kinds of programs. That'll be great.
Right, and we're trying to raise money for these new technology. This is going to be a big business, I think, these learning centers, to create this environment in Hawaii. It's language independent, so a stroke is a stroke, a heart attack is a heart attack, and so that we can cater to the Asian physicians who will come and train in these virtual environments. They don't need to know English.
Is that going to be a profit center as well?
It could be. It could be.
Dean Cadman, you want to leave a website, perhaps, or an email address?
Well, I can leave my email address. It's cadman@hawaii.edu.
That's distinctive and short.
That
Laura,
is.
you had something.
I have a question, Dean Cadman, bringing this back to Hawaii and what Hawaii is good at and what our strengths are. Earlier in our telemedicine segment, Dale Moyen spoke about physicians continuing education and telemedicine, and Hawaii being one of the first centers to do that, as well as continuing niche market for us. And I've read about PBL, problem-based learning, as being another strength center for Hawaii. Can you elaborate on areas that we're strong in?
Well, yeah, we're strong in the telehealth areas because we need to be. We have students on all islands, and they can't travel back to the university for seminars, so we have telehealth, video conferencing at all of these centers. We were probably one of the first medical schools to do this. We are one of 6 or 7 medical schools that use the problem-based method of teaching. Harvard is one of the 6. And this allows a student to learn the science of medicine in the context of a patient. For example, if you are learning about insulin, the student will have a diabetic patient, and they will learn about the molecular biology of insulin. They'll learn about the pancreas. They'll learn how to diagnose and treat diabetes. They retain this information in the context of a clinical problem, and then they move on to another problem, for example, heart disease.
So this is like the case method in law school or the case method in business school.
Yes. And they're separated into groups of 4 to 6 with a faculty tutor. And they're never the same groups of 4 or 6 ever. So this is, I get asked the question all the time. You can have one faculty member give a lecture to one person or 200 people. But the problem-based learning method is so faculty intensive that that's why most schools don't do it. You have 5 groups of students. You have 12 faculty. You know, there's 62 students in our class, so you'd have 2 groups of 6 and 5 and 12 or 10 of 5, and you need 12 faculty to supervise these students.
But I've read also that you have people coming from Korea and Japan to be a part of this problem-based learning program.
Right.
That apparently they don't have access to.
Yes, we are one of the nation's training centers for problem-based learning.
You know, it sounds great. It sounds personal. It sounds collaborative. It sounds like the best kind of medical education you can get. Honestly, my reaction is it's first class what you're describing. It is going to build first-class doctors, but it's so different from what you see if you go to any public school with huge classes and no personal attention and all kinds of learning problems that are not addressed. Comment?
Yeah, I think that it's been shown that if you pay particular attention to a student, especially when they're early on in their education, like kindergarten or first grade, that they'll learn better. And that's probably why home-based learning is so successful. And you get teachers that teach 30 students in first grade, you know, only the very gifted will succeed in that environment. And the average or below average will say, I've just lost. And before you find out they're lost, they're in the 8th grade.
Can we get to some calls? We have Larry on the line. He's been waiting a while. Larry, are you there?
I'm here. Not
Larry,
too long.
do you have a question for Dean Edwin Cadman?
Yes, I do. You know, people talking about how much money the building costs, why we need research and all that. I wonder if Dean Cadman can bring it down to earth explain the benefit to the average person. Like, I know the doctors who graduate from the medical school tend to remain in Hawaii, so they're our own people in our own communities. But let's say a baby pops out in Kapiolani, and the staff takes a look at this baby. Something's really wrong, but they can't figure out what it is. They've never seen anything like this, and they really need to know right away. So maybe Dean Cadman can explain how the fact that there's a medical school located in Hawaii doing research is going to affect that baby and that family.
Well, that's an excellent question also. First off, I think, and I spent 20 years at Yale on their medical school faculty, and for 7 years was a chief physician for the medical center. Prior to that was chairman of internal medicine. So what I'm going to say has validity. Our hospitals in Honolulu are some of the best hospitals, staffed by some of the best nurses, best administrators, and we have some of the best outstanding physicians in this country. So
you heard it here on ThinkTech Hawaii.
Wow, what a statement.
It is a statement.
But you're right. Research advances clinical knowledge. We're recruiting together with the hospitals a molecular geneticist, a clinical geneticist. We were trying to develop a molecular genetics department, and research expands any discipline, whether it be engineering or education, business. It expands the ability to do good in that community.
Can we go to another caller?
Yes.
We have Frank on the line.
Aloha, Dean Cadman. It must be such a thrill for you, this opportunity to put a new research center up. Of course, it's a big challenge. I wonder if you can talk about how you are prepared to do this.
Well, maybe Frank is asking about the next phase.
Yeah.
Well, what I mean is his background and how you feel qualified to do this, put together a research center here.
My training is a cancer specialist, and I have done bench research for 20 years before I got into administration. There are some wonderful research faculty, wonderful education faculty here. When I came, I got the commitment of the university to recruit 30 new faculty. And when I came here, there were between 25 and 30 faculty over the age of 65. So those people are beginning to retire. So what we have here is an opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years to really create a new faculty, beginning with the recruiting of 60 new positions. Now, what we don't want to do is recruit faculty all on state dollars. So these research money, 75% of it goes for salaries for faculty and these research technicians and associates. So what we want to do is create an environment will accommodate these new faculty. I'm amazed that, we have all sorts of people who grew up here, and I get emails and phone calls and letters and curriculum vitae resumes all the time. And there are wonderful faculty that want to come back.
Well, part of it is what we talk about on this show all the time, our secret weapon, which is quality of life and weather and so forth. But one of the things that sort of connect the dots I'd like to ask you about is money here. So we spoke about the bond issue, which is essentially coming from those who bought the bonds. And you're going to need another $150 million later on down. And I understand you're not going to get that from a bond issue necessarily. You're going to go out for private funding. Is that what's going to happen?
Right.
How are you going to handle phase two?
Well, phase one is the medical school education building and research building. There is sufficient space on this 10-acre site for another research building. Phase two, it will be, or is programmed to be, the research component of the cancer center. Private industry will be mixing in with phase one and phase two, depending upon the needs of industry. And that'll be right across the street with between 200 and 400,000 square feet.
So you got the original bonds, you got the grants that are coming from NIH and other similar places, you got investments by private investors, You got Act 221. Where does Act 221 fit in all of this in terms of, creating the money necessary to build the industry in and around the new medical school?
Well, for those who aren't familiar with Act 221, it's a tax credit program. So if you are a Hawaii taxpayer and you donate $2 million, up to $2 million, then you can get a $2 million tax credit. You can donate or put into this company $100,000 and you'll get a $100,000 tax credit.
Have you seen any companies come in and establish businesses around the medical school, involving the medical school, supporting the medical school using Act 221?
Yes, there is a company called Biophoric, which is developed by two scientists from Amgen. They want to develop a drug discovery company here, and they have gotten Act 221 investors into their company.
So we're off to a start with Act 221 involving your new program for building Hawaii's economy with the medical school.
Right, and I just traveled this weekend to Seattle to visit with a scientist who was created a private research institute similar to Scripps, and I'm having him consult with us to help create this private research institute environment.
We're just about out of time. I would like to ask Lori if she could give us a summary of what we have learned and wrap up the discussion we've had with Dean Cadman tonight. It's a lot of material, deep as an ocean, so to speak.
Oh, yes, and I don't know if I can swim through this ocean very well, but we did learn that the University of Hawaii Biomed School is one of the dots that connects Hawaii's tech community into critical mass, and telemedicine that we mentioned earlier is another dot. And we look forward to more reports from you in the next 30 days or 90 days when you start to break ground on the university.
We'd like you to come back and give us a 1 or 2 minute spot here on the show and tell us how it went when you broke ground. And Gordon Bruce will be there.
Good, good.
Can you wrap up? This is your opportunity to give us your advice to our listeners and your statement of the future for UH Medical School.
Well, I think I've been here 2.5 years, and I'm delighted to be part of the team that will create this new environment that will hopefully drive the biotech industry for Hawaii and help diversify the economy by creating jobs and bringing money into the state. And I'm just delighted to be the dean of the John A. Burns School of Medicine.
That's great. And it really is something that you've done. You've done extraordinary things. Did you ever think when you came to Hawaii that it would go this way?
I thought it would be tougher.
That's great.
I think he kind of expected it.
We've been speaking with Dean Ed Cadman on science in Kaka'ako, dream or reality, and he has brought us current on what is going on. Thank you so much, Dean Cadman, for appearing with us and answering our questions and participating with us on the show.
I'm delighted to be here.
Moving on to the topic of our show, we're calling it Halftime at the John A. Burns School of Medicine, acronym JABSOM. What does the future hold? We've been promising you in-depth discussions about developments at JABSOM, and because the success or failure of that project will hugely impact Hawaii's future business and business reputation, so this is an important examination for sure.
Heard it was this year because of needing to let the world know it's in the business.
Dr. Cadman, in the paper today, the Star Bulletin, they talked about something that we've talked about before, namely the epiphany, the moment of vision, the moment when this all became clear about what was needed, what was possible in Kaka'ako. Can you tell our listeners about that?
Well, I began interviewing in June of 1998, and they were talking about closing the medical school, but they were also talking about diversifying their economy. And one of the sectors was biotechnology. And I said, you couldn't import biotechnology. It's clustered around where the research is being done, primarily at research medical schools and private research institutes. That's why they're in San Diego, California, or San Francisco Bay Area, Denver, Seattle, New Haven. And they called me back 6 months later. and they wanted me to do this project. Now, fast forward 2 years, 2000, the governor, Ben Cayetano, wanted me to meet him in Kaka'ako, and on the 10th floor of the Gold Bond building, and it's a corner conference room, and he pointed out this 10-acre site. And I looked around, and this is where the biotech industry for the state will be nurtured, because the medical school will be the creation of the science for the biotechnology industry. And there's 100 acres available currently. And so it's a two building project, and it will be complete this time next year. And it's 335,000 square feet. The science building is 216,000 square feet. And the education building is 118,000 square feet. It's a $150 million project. It's not a tax-based issue. The interest and principal will be coming out of the tobacco settlement funds. It would be a wonderful concept to build the biotech industry in Kaka'ako.
Right around the medical school.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that things are happening fairly quickly. In March, as I recall, you're going to bring the faculty and the students in. They're going to be there in place in the medical school. And a year from now or so, that is in the fall of 2005, you're going to have the researchers in place.
Right. Well, we're planning a bioscience conference in January, and we'll bring outstanding researchers and luminaries from the biotech world. And it's a 2-day conference, and that would be the opening of the education building. And then the opening of the science building, as I mentioned, it will be turned over to us in June of this next year.
You mentioned that it was a $150 million project, but there's another part to it, right? And there's another $150 million on top of that in some second stage of financing?
The $150 million project was $100 million for the cancer center, and then $50 million to renovate the old medical school on the Manoa campus. We don't require $150 million for the medical school.
Huh. So is it that the first $150 million will cover the building that's there now?
Yes.
I see. And by the way, if our listeners haven't seen it, it's quite beautiful. It is a nice piece of work, and it is basically up already, isn't it?
Yeah.
We had status reports along the way, but I must say that the color of that roof is hard to describe. You have to go look at it. It's beautiful green, and it matches with the ocean behind it, and it's worth taking the tour.
Well, if you are looking at the Star Bulletin and you see the article where Dean Cadman is quoted, he is on the 10th floor of the Gold Bond building looking down and saying, that's reality. He actually sees a building now, 4 years later?
Must be some satisfaction to you, Dean.
Yeah, well, it's a team effort. I mean, it's a common vision from the community, the state government, and the university.
Dean Cadman, I'm sure you have more interest now for student enrollments, although I don't think your enrollment was projected to grow for the new medical school. How are you handling any of those inquiries?
Well, we have 62 slots per year, and we had 1,373 applicants this year. And that.
Wow. Does this mean it's not worth it for me to put in my application?
Yeah, well.
Request denied. Wow, that's going to be a stellar 62-person class. Yeah. Amazing.
I wanted to get a definitional thing straight. When you take JABSOM as against the entire life sciences community planned around it, is JABSOM a lightning rod? Is it a catalyst? Or is it an anchor? Like an anchor tenant in a shopping center?
Well, it's
he needs all of the above.
Yeah. It's a catalyst. And it's also an anchor. You know, this shopping mall concept is appropriate. We will have an anchor and the little shops, biotech companies around it. And it will be a mall, a park, bioscience park. And, the small companies would have access to our expensive equipment, the library, animal facilities, child care center. They would have access to our graduate students to help them do their research.
So, Dr. Cadman, you've been spending time networking around the country, finding researchers and important scientists who would come here and participate in this. How are you doing?
Well, we're doing outstandingly well. We have a researcher from Harvard who's a molecular geneticist. We just recruited a person from the CDC who was responsible for West Nile and dengue, and he wants to develop a world-class tropical disease medicine center here. And what a wonderful place to do it, in Hawaii. We have to have a wonderful, outstanding tropical disease medicine center here.
It fits.
Yeah. And we recruited a professor from Johns Hopkins, a healthcare researcher, and HMSA gave us $1 million to develop this initiative as healthcare quality research. The list goes on and on.
So you have already a couple dozen of these fellows tied down?
Yeah. And we grew our research budget 700% to $25 million this year. The faculty got awarded $46 million from the National Institutes of Health in this fiscal year. These are multi-year awards, of course, but the revenues of the research, $25 million.
So my wife and me, we're going to go on a walk on Saturday night. We're going to see the spectacular Life Sciences Center with the medical school and all that other. When should we plan to go?
Not after dark.
Thank you for that. We're going to have to wrap up. And Ed Cadman, Dean Ed Cadman, have you got any wisdom or website for our listeners?
Well, extraordinary things are happening in Hawaii, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
And we are very glad you are. We're talking about halftime at JAPSOM. What does the future hold? Thank you so much, all of you, for participating in ThinkTech Hawaii.